Hello, everybody. I'm Derek Arden, and welcome to Monday Night Live. Tonight, I've got a very interesting person on from Sunderland in the Northeast, somebody who has served the British Army for 9 years in all sorts of dangerous and hostile places, Northern Ireland, Sierra Leone, Afghanistan. Shaun West. Shaun, thanks so much for joining us. Let me just tell you a little bit more about Shaun before we get going. When Shaun left the army, he went into security, first of all for working for somebody else, but then spotted an opportunity to set up his own business. And his own business was employing up to 36 people at one time. And when COVID came along, that was fine. But the biggest issue was when Russia invaded Ukraine, and you can make up his mind who some of his biggest customers were in the UK. Now he has a boutique security company, and he's into mentoring and coaching, which is how I met Shaun. Shaun's obviously very resilient, which I want to talk to him about later, but also he's very determined. And when he was turned down for a TEDx talk in the UK, virtually at every TEDx, he went to Europe and in the end got accepted in Helsinki, of all places, which is a beautiful country in the summer, but probably not so good in the middle of the winter if anyone's been there. Shaun, thanks for joining Monday Night Live. I really appreciate this. And perhaps you'd tell me a little bit about some of the things that happened in the British Army.
Hey Derek, thanks for the introduction and great to be here. Great to meet you guys. Yes, I joined the British Army in 1997, became a paratrooper. And one of the interesting things about that was I'd never actually jumped out of a plane before in my life. I'd never been on a plane, sorry. So as a kid, all my holidays were caravan holidays. Um, so the first time I actually got on the plane, I jumped out of it, which was bizarre. And I actually flew for 2 years in the British Army, jumped out of I don't know how many planes, and it was 2 years before I actually landed in a plane in Canada, and it was actually more scary coming to land than it was jumping out.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. And you served some pretty interesting and dangerous places, starting off with Northern Ireland, I think, but the troubles were over by then, weren't they?
Yeah, no, there was still a lot of trouble that's unspoken on the news. But Northern Ireland was my first tour, and then went to Macedonia, Sierra Leone, Afghanistan, whilst I was a soldier, and then leaving the forces, I went out to Afghanistan, Iraq. So I still go to hostile regions even as a civilian. And one of the other jobs I'd done actually when I left the forces, I don't think we spoke about, Derek. Actually, I trained the presidential security team of a West African nation, which is another, really nice job that I undertook post my time in the forces.
Nice job. And what did you learn in the British Army? Because it must be very different to running your own company.
What I loved about the parachute regiment and what it taught me, I think the British Army has lots of different regiments that are regional regiments. The parachute regiment, people travel from all over the world to join. And I think you had people that, I don't know, you could say couldn't spell Bob backwards, which is me, or people that were, essentially a lawyer or something like that, and they just completely changed what they want to do. They wanted a different challenge. And when you put these people all together in a trench, people from different nationalities, different backgrounds, it just worked, it gelled together. And I really like that. The mix of people brings great bonding, great stories, great comradeship. When you get too many people, that's all the same. It's very different. You learn a lot more. You know,
How tough was the training? We hear stories about the SAS training, don't we? But how tough was it to be a paratrooper?
I think God, I joined at 16-year-old. So when you're 16-year-old, you're still growing, right? You're still a young
Mm.
a young boy, and I remember turning up and going through the gates for the first time, and you call it the big imposing gates, and there's no return once the gates close, and you have them platoon sergeants and corporals all screaming and shouting at you. It was terrifying as a young boy. And I always remember going out when you spoke, the 6 a.m. rise, going out in the morning, erging on the back, up and down the hills. And it was terrible. Your blisters on your feet, the aching of your muscles. But I always remember getting back when you get in the shower afterwards, and the feeling you got that you actually gone out and done some physical activity, and it just felt great. So yeah, it was tough, but I think as long as your mindset's, you know where you're going, you know where you want to get to, you lock onto that target and you just keep going, right?
And did many people fail that initial sort of training?
Yeah, yeah, and God, even in the first few weeks, people who turned up were completely unsuitable. They've never been away from home. I hadn't. But some people, they turn up and they don't like being away from home, so people would leave in the first instances. You'd also get many, great people who would leave purely through injury, through no fault of their own, good fit guys. Um, and actually what you'd find, I think a lot of the fitter people weren't always the better ones. The fitter ones who, would come first on all of the, assault courses, steeplechase and all of that sort of thing. But when we got to I guess the harder tests with the heavier weights, the longer miles, things like that, we'd actually see some of the fitter people drop back as some of the unfitter people were getting fitter along the way. Um, and I think it was just because their fitness was improving all of the time, where the fitter people, it was the first time they'd felt things that would challenge them, maybe.
Mm,
So it brought in a lot of grit. So these, while they were fit, maybe they didn't have the same grit and determination that maybe someone who wasn't as fit had.
sure. And how long did it, how long was the training and how did you feel when you first went on your first tour of duty in a hostile zone?
Well, the training was just over 6 months, and it was amazing. The day the day you pass out and your parents come and view, and you're wearing the beret and all of that. It's a great feeling, great achievement. And you go to your battalion, and then it's almost like you pass out, you're on top of the world, and then when you go to your battalion, you're brought straight back down to earth. You're starting again at day one, week one, right? And then it's learning the trade. So what the depot does, it gets you to become a basic infantry soldier. You have all the tools. And then when you go to your battalion or unit, that's when you really learn your trade, you learn your skills. And the first operational tour I went to Northern Ireland, and you go through a package of Northern Ireland training, which was amazing. Actually, I really, really, really enjoyed it. And as a young boy, you're getting they had a mock-up village where they put you through different scenarios. People, questioning you, put you in different scenarios, and you'd even have times where you get attacked in the street. People would be called out, and they'd have their shields. Get firebombed and all sorts of things. The riot training, all of that. So it was really exciting as a young boy to go through it and actually just be tested, I guess, you know, out on the streets. But yeah, no, it was really exciting times.
But then they put you out on the street after that, did they? Which is, I guess, a bit of an adrenaline rush at that point.
It is, and I think we spoke outside of this, and one of the things I could honestly say, which some people might think is bizarre, as a soldier and as a bodyguard, I never actually felt fear when I was, working in these countries, Iraq's, Afghanistan's, wherever it was. I actually felt excitement because you've been trained to a particular level, you had a particular set of skills, and it was nice to be tested. Um, so I used to look forward to not going out in the ground, but visiting these countries so you could be tested. And I think I spoke to you that I'd never felt fear. It was always excitement, and it wasn't until the time I decided to come back from these hostile regions. I got a flight from Kabul um, to Dubai, then Dubai back to the UK. And I remember the girl who was serving drinks and food on the Emirates flight, and they came down and she said, "Would you like a drink? Would you like some food?" And I ordered a whiskey, and I never drank whiskey. I never did. I remember having this whiskey, and it felt great. And I ordered another whiskey, and I had three whiskeys, and I sat there. And whilst I'd never felt fear, I was coming back. It was the birth of my second child, and I made the decision there and then on the flight that I wasn't coming back, and I was going to make it work in the UK. And I actually remember sitting there. It was like a pressure valve was just being released, and I sat there and I thought, I've still got my arms, still got my legs, and many of the people that I serve with haven't, you know,
Wow.
or I've
Yeah.
lost friends. So whilst I've never felt that fear, because you were on that particular set of training, and you're in that, you are putting yourself in that zone. I think when you are finally coming out of it and that realization, it was like, I've still got all my faculties, all my bits and pieces,
Mm,
and it was
wow.
yeah, so you do carry it, but you just don't know it.
Sean, that's really interesting because there's a lot of high achievers on this. A lot of high achievers watch Monday Night Live, and we've all had wake up moments or light bulb
Yeah.
moments. And it sounds like you had yours after three whiskeys on an Emirates flight from Dubai. Fascinating. Let's talk before we move on. I just want to talk about Afghanistan a bit because that probably had more high profile in the UK press, and then with the US, pulling out. But I know that you were probably there before that. What was your overall impression of Afghanistan? And I would ask you this: did you ever have to negotiate with the Taliban?
Actually, yes, I did. Not me personally, but I went there as a soldier, which was we were some of the first British soldiers out there back in it was 2001. After 9/11, we were in Macedonia at the time. I guess everyone remembers where they were when the Twin Towers came down. It was literally only a couple of months after that we flew out to Afghanistan um, in the winter, which was very interesting. But it was a really quiet tour. The tours since that way British Army have been, have been pretty brutal. It was a great tour, loads of stuff. But I went back out there as a bodyguard, which was, I guess, far more dangerous. And we were protecting, British diplomats, people from the Serious Organised Crime Agency, so people that were going in doing agent handling, things like that. So we would protect them when we were going into the city. There'd be meetings arranged, and we would provide the protection for them while the meeting went on, and then we, leave to head back to the camp. So yes, I have been there when negotiations have gone on with tribal elders and all that sort of thing in the different villages.
And presumably, status is very important for those tribal elders, and they're presumably surrounded by younger people. But as opposed to in the UK, in the West, sometimes the wise people aren't always in a position to be negotiating or giving advice.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's definitely. I mean, what interesting. I remember when we first got there in the January, it was, and just seeing these guys, where they're shivering with our big jackets on and boots and warm gear, and you see some of these guys that are walking around in flip flops and their feet are like rubber because they're used to walking around in this. Um,
Yeah,
there's um, some tough individuals over there for sure.
sure, sure. So when you came back to the UK, you decided to go into the security industry because
Yep,
already been experienced
yep.
in bodyguarding. Tell us what you can about that.
Well, as I said, I came back from Afghanistan, and it was the birth of my second child, and I thought I didn't want to keep going back out to these countries, putting the family through all the stress that comes with that. And I thought I'm going to, I've got a good background from my time as a paratrooper. Course I'd done in South Africa was one of the best known bodyguard courses in the world. Um, my experience in Iraq, Afghanistan, post military, and I thought I'm going to set up in the UK. And being from Sunderland, the northeast, there isn't that much work for bodyguards in the northeast. So
Mm,
what I had to
mm.
do was base myself down in London, and I rented an apartment down there
Oh,
because if someone calls you, are you available today? If you're in Newcastle or Sunderland, nobody's going to call you, right?
yeah.
Um, so I kind of committed, rented somewhere without even having a job there, and I thought I'm just going to make it work. And the work came, and I was fortunate enough that I guess, I guess the big skill that set me apart from a lot of people was I had a pretty good first impression. So when I was working with a lot of, um, I guess, high net worth individuals, maybe their wives or whatever it is, you turn up, you look the part, turn up on time, right place, nice manner. And at the end of every job, it would always be, oh, Shaun was great. Can we have Shaun again? Um, so I became really successful as an operator in that space. And then, I'd say a couple of years, then I thought I'd like to create my own company and try a look myself and bring in some work myself. And I quickly found that it was a completely different set of skills running your own business to being a successful operator. And you had to go out, get the work, and manage the tasks and all of that. And I realized it was a lot more. I hadn't had enough time in the industry to become successful at that yet. So I closed down that company within about 18 months, continued to work for other people before setting up having another bash at it, creating my company, which became very successful. And yeah, and I guess that's where I've come from. So I set up that company in 2011, which is still running now.
Fantastic. And I mean, as you said, it's a totally different set of skills. What did you do differently with your second company that you didn't do with your first company?
I think when you're an operator and I guess it could be anything, a plumber or an electrician, you're
Mm,
on the tools as such. And I was as a
sure.
bodyguard, and I think it's just a different mindset. You've got to think differently because you're not when you're fresh to business ownership. You want to do everything, the marketing, the sales, and you can't grow a business if you're the one doing everything, right? So it was just thinking differently. I can't do the tasks. We have to put people on them. Yes, I won't be getting the day rate, which I think when you think small as a new business owner, you think, oh God, I need that money as it's coming in. But if I'm working every day, providing security to whoever it may be, how can I take the phone calls when
Mm,
things are coming in?
mm,
I can't be answering the phone when I'm sat next to a VIP in the vehicle. So I just had to take the step back, and actually be the chess player as opposed to a chess piece as
mm.
such. I think that was probably the big lesson. Be a general, not a private soldier.
Well, could I say congratulations on that because you left school at 16 and joined the army, and you're quite an entrepreneur and run a business. You told me that COVID was good for you, but Russia invading Ukraine wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, I was really fortunate. I mean, got so many businesses and people that I know, got lost their businesses and livelihood during COVID, and I was really fortunate just with the people that I work with. It was interesting, actually, two different dynamics of two different nationalities that I provided to at the time. So a lot of my business was to heavily to high net worth Russian individuals, and I also provided to another nationality. And when COVID happened, the Russian side, what's the word? It was almost like they wanted to double up on everything to keep people away from the family because there's new diseases going around. We need to keep people away.
yeah, sure.
So my business really grew during that period because it was a case of bring people in. People weren't allowed to go and mingle in public, so we had to create almost sterile zones where someone would be on for a couple of weeks. They don't go out. So then the replacement operator who was coming to replace them would come. We'd have sterile zones. They'd be there, get tested several days, and then once they're clear, then that person could go home. So it was almost doubling up on the staff. Um, so it was really good for me, and my business really grew during that period. Um, whereas with the other nationality, it was almost get everybody away. I don't need security anymore.
Right, right.
Get so it was a real interesting space because I was getting two sets of messaging to two sets of
Mm.
employees that one, we've got your back. Don't worry, we're going to get through this. And then the other side, I'm really sorry, the client doesn't want you guys anymore. That there isn't anything we can do about
Sure.
it.
I was
And
just
yeah,
thinking I was just thinking because you're in security, I don't suppose you had any trouble getting paid because some of us had trouble getting paid in those times. But I guess you're going to pay the security guy that's looking after you.
yeah, I was fortunate. However, when we talk about the other situation, which you mentioned, which was the Russia-Ukraine war, that happened and I didn't get paid because when, with my main client base being high net worth Russians, when my first major client came under sanction, I immediately had to stop trading with that individual. I had a number of staff that I had to pay, um, which I couldn't receive payment for. And then the next client, it happened. And then the next, it was a bit of a domino effect. And over the space of like 3 weeks, I lost 90% of the business. Um,
Mm.
and it was a real big lesson to learn, um, to almost diversify your client base. I felt I didn't need to because I was very well remunerated through the clients that I provided to. And it felt at times like I was working 25 hours a day, 8 days a week because I'm getting calls from all different time zones, different properties, different countries. And I thought, I don't want to expand the business any further because I don't need the money, don't have large needs. I'm paid well. But if I had at the time when all that money was coming in, took on a business development manager and maybe diversified that client base, it would have been absorbed a lot better. Um, I was just fortunate enough that I'd built enough of a runway within the business over a period of years that allowed me to absorb that, you know, pay all of the guys. But yeah, it was a big blow. It was very stressful
Hmm.
at the time.
Now, we talked about high net worth individuals, and a lot of people on this are interested in football. Football's a dangerous occupation, really, from a security point of view, because the bad guys know when they're playing, and they earn a serious amount of money. And I know that, so no names, no pack drill, you have looked after some high profile footballers that we would know. But if you got a phone call from a footballer now, what would the protection that you would offer him? Let's say he's
Well,
just got a new contract at £350,000 a week in the press on Talk Sport. What are you going to provide me if it's me?
it's interesting because most of my background in the football industry is with the football club owners as opposed to the footballers, because that's a billionaire market. And the crazy thing I learned was, whilst these footballers get hundreds of thousands of pounds a week, and you think, God, they can afford anything. And actually, when you're looking at around the clock security, and you're talking, which the billionaires have, they'll have people with their kids. Some of them have 4 and 5 kids. They'll have people that'll be out there during the day, during the night, at their properties. So it's a 24/7 operation all around the year. They're all on good money. So generally, the footballers wouldn't have that around the clock security. What they would generally have would be almost, it's termed as away day security, because fixture list is published in advance. So, if David Beckham's playing, for Manchester United, and Manchester United's playing in Barcelona next week, and obviously, David Beckham's house is going to be empty. His wife's going to be there with the kids. Um, so what a lot of the footballers do, they engage in security for when they're away, to protect their property, their family, that sort of thing. But with the owners, a lot of them are, uber high net worth individuals, and it's a lot more of a more high value operation, with a lot more cogs in the wheel. Generally, it's more ad hoc with the footballers.
Okay, that's yeah. I never really thought about that. Yeah. So we were talking about dogs. I asked you, did you have any dog handlers? A lot of people interested in dogs here and the way they sniff out things, suss things out, intuitive that we don't have. What was your experience with dogs and that type of security?
Yeah, so personally, I'm not a dog handler, but yeah, we did. We engaged at a number of our properties. We had large estates, with some of the high net worth individuals that we worked with, and we'd have, so it was 24/7, almost like concierge type security, residential security. But we'd also have dog patrols. One, because there's a large footprint of a property to cover, but also, if you pull a dog out of a vehicle, it tends to, what's the word I'm looking for? Bring the situation to a close a lot quicker than two
Mm,
alpha males going toe to toe. Right, when the dog gets out the vehicle, it calms down pretty quickly.
yeah. How did you check out some of the people that work for you? Because I'm just thinking, there might have been some bad guys applying for jobs with you. What's the process to make sure that your brand is kept, at the top of the game?
I've been quite fortunate because I'm not one of the larger conglomerate companies. I've always been a bit of a almost small boutique company, and in the security industry, in the close protection sector, which is where I operate, it's quite a small niche. It's a small world. So it's about, everything comes through recommendation, referral. You don't gain business through, putting out Facebook posts and that sort of advertising. It's all about who you know. And your reputation follows you everywhere. So it doesn't take long. I'm a former paratrooper, and that's a small circle as well. So it's tapping into the network that you
Mm,
already know. Um, and in that billionaire network where you've got different billionaires, they all have their teams, and they all go to the same events, the same places. So you get to meet a lot of people. And one of my other businesses I run also there is the British Bodyguard Association. So I had quite a large network through that as well.
you run the British Bodyguard Association, or do you
Yeah, I
really?
do. Yeah, and
Wow.
I produce the Circuit magazine, which is a magazine that's targeted at the security industry, so I'm quite well known within the security space.
Yeah.
So it was quite easy to, I guess, do background checks on all of the individuals that used to work
Yeah.
with
Well,
us.
brilliant. Well done. So we're nearly out of time. It's been a fantastic interview. Thank you so much. But I
No
want to
worries.
ask you one or two questions for people watching this on YouTube or listening to this in a podcast. Resilience is a really big thing at the moment. Social media is putting younger people under pressure. I can't think of another job that needed more resilience as being in Afghanistan with a gun being shot at. How did you manage it? What advice would you give to younger people?
But I had training to deal with that, and I think it's all about exposure to whatever it is. I had a terrible fear of public speaking, and until you put yourself in the ring as such, and join Toastmasters and put yourself in that ring and start doing it, what's the worst that can happen? You stand up, you give an icebreaker, for instance, and then the next time it's a little bit easier, and it's a little bit easier, and each time you do that thing that you're afraid of, you build up a bit of a tolerance, a bit of a resilience against it, and just think back to, at a time you were confident. How did you feel? How did you carry yourself? And then when you realize, say it was football, and would you go and training before you done the FA Cup final? Of course you would. And it's the same. So if you want to be a speaker, then
Yeah.
you get some speaker training, or if you want to become a soldier, then become
So what you're
fit, get
saying is preparation, training, role play.
exposure. Yeah, exposure, and just sometimes I think one of the biggest things that people don't do, it's the taking action of the thing that they want to do. And I think it's one of the worst. What I hate saying is wasted talent. So many people can achieve so many things, but they just never pull that trigger and actually do it because they sit and think, oh, I'll wait till the conditions are perfect, and the conditions are never going to be perfect. You'll see people you went to school with that maybe you feel like you're 10 times more capable than, but maybe they're running a multi-million-pound business or whatever it is. And why is that? It's the reason because they've actually took action and
Mm.
done things rather than sit and procrastinated. And I think sometimes we just need to put yourself in the ring and give it a
Yeah,
go.
well, I guess as former chairman of the Professional Speaking Association in the UK, I find it really hard to compute that you were more worried about public speaking than going and facing the Taliban in Afghanistan. I can't get my head around that, but it just shows the brain's a funny thing, isn't it? And it's a funny thing
It
how it
is. It is.
works. Shaun, thanks for joining us. I hope you'll join us again. It's been really fascinating. Shaun, if anyone wants to get hold of you watching this on YouTube or listening to this on the podcast, how do they get hold of you?
So you can get hold of me on LinkedIn. My name's Shaun West. I think you put the link in the show notes. Hopefully, or my coaching website, which is www.shaunwest.co. And if they're looking for security services, then it'd be shaunwest.co.uk.
Fantastic. Well, LinkedIn's fantastic for getting hold of people. It's probably the best way
Absolutely.
now, isn't it? Because emails get spammed out, etc. Will you join us informally afterwards for
Yeah,
a few
absolutely.
questions? And can I thank everybody for joining Monday Night Live and give a Shaun the usual vote of thanks in the normal way. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Shaun, and I look forward to you joining us in the future.
Thank you.